Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to 2018 Green Life Food Festival. And my name is Eugene Imai. This year, in the process of planning our event, many happenings in the last minute. The person who was supposed to be MC got sick, Diana Jorkins. She canceled. So I'm her replacement. So I'm kind of awkward, but I'll do my best. And this event we plan every year, and last few years we've been using this name, Green Life Food Festival, because the food is so important for everyone, whether which religion you are in, or which country you are in, or whether you're poor or rich, or educated, uneducated. Everybody loves food, and food is so important. So we decided to use food in the name of the event. And we would like to have an opportunity for us to get connected. And so today, I wish everybody enjoy the event by eating wonderful, healthy, delicious food, and meet new people. You can get connected. And I'd like to introduce the first speaker, Remi Zajac. And if you can have a time, please visit their booth in the garden, the meditation garden. They have a wonderful booth, and Remi brought his entire family, the wife, Zubeda, and 2 sons. And I met Remi about 8 years ago, and the Remi and Zubeda left France about 30 years ago, and they've been traveling. When they went to Japan and Germany, and finally they settled down in US. And 8 years ago, they went to Japan and got deep inspiration. And vaguely, they were thinking of sustainable living, but they decided, they were determined to find land so that they can start sustainable living with the whole family. That happened 8 years ago. Finally, they were guided to this place nearby Ukiah, California, and they felt the land is calling. And the Remi has been working for AT&T and Microsoft, so he's a very left-brain person, but he became a right brain. And they started learning the wine and the farming and everything. It's amazing. And they transformed a conventionally farmed vineyard into their award-winning natural winemaking operation. The name is Poiwakana Farm, in a process that took several years. The couple's Petit Syrah came away from the 2017 Mendocino County Fair wine competition with 3 awards, and 4 awards at the San Francisco Chronicle wine competition. Amazing. And I'm looking forward to further development of this remarkable wine and to help us to be connected with the earth. Now let me introduce Remi here.
Thank you for that very kind introduction. So we have a small vineyard operation in Mendocino County, and we uprooted a few vines like a few years back, and we also prune the vineyard every winter. And we we are thinking we try to compost those vines and those canes, but they decompose very, very slowly under natural conditions. And what most people do, most vineyard managers do, either they chip it and then they spread it again, or they make really big piles and they burn it. So I was always amazed at the amount of smoke coming out of this big agricultural pile, and always wondering what we could do differently. And then one day I was, I read a post by Albert Bates on the biochar solution. And I started really exploring what is biochar and how can it help us on the farm to be more sustainable and do what people call now carbon farming. Carbon farming meaning building carbon in soil to improve the health of the soil. So what is biochar? Biochar is actually, so when you burn wood, wood doesn't burn. What burns is the gases coming out of the wood. So when the wood is heated, some of the sugars and the carbohydrate convert into gas, and this gas is burnt. And the wood, the lignin in the wood, will burn in a second step only if there is oxygen. So when there is no oxygen at the right by the wood, this will just stay in a crystallized form, right? So biochar is essentially charcoal, and everybody knows about charcoal, but what people call biochar is essentially a form of charcoal. There are two things. One, it's used for mostly agricultural purposes, and the second thing is that it needs to be safe for that. So in charcoal you can find all kinds of things, but in biochar it needs to be no heavy metals in particular and things like that. So I have some example of biochar that I took from a burn we did yesterday. So you will be welcome to touch it and look at it. It's beautiful. And some people may know about activated charcoal, which is also a form of charcoal, but which has been further processed to enhance its property, essentially make it even more porous and better able to absorb other material. So it's going through there are several industrial processes that can do that. And of course, it's much more expensive. It's used mostly for filtering air or filtering water. So who uses biochar? Well, the story of biochar really started when people discovered what they call the black soils of Amazonia. So the first explorer of Amazonia, the Portuguese, find these black soils that were really, really deep, and they were wondering what they were. They were calling those terra preta do Indio, meaning the black soils of the Indians. So the natural Amazonian soils are like that. They are really, really shallow, and it's mostly clay, and very not fertile at all, very poor. But what they discovered are these really black soil, very rich in minerals, in carbon, and also in microbial activity. And sometimes they can go to very deep. They can be very, very deep. So these soils actually have been built over the last 2,000 years, 3,000 years by pre-Columbian inhabitants of Amazonia. And using this soil, they were able to sustain very, very large population of tens or hundreds of million people along the Amazonia. All these people disappeared when they got after when the Europeans came into America, they propagate infectious diseases, which really killed everybody even before the actual contact that the colonizer made after that. So all these cities disappeared. All these towns disappeared and were completely covered by the forest. So this is the origin of the legend of like the lost city of Z that some of you may know. And this is how, oops. Okay, something happened to the presentation. I don't know what's happening there. I don't know. I don't seem to have any pictures. Yeah, it doesn't work on my computer too. Something happened to the file. Okay. Well, I can probably continue talking about it just using the titles. It's no pictures. Can I can use another one. Yes. So I have two things. One, which is like just the direct reason of a burn. I'll show some pictures if I can. And this has been processed to some kind of usable form. I will talk about it. It's just crushed. Can you use, where is it? Pin key. Where's the dock? But it doesn't. Okay, so sorry about that. The fertility of those soils is pretty amazing. So the plants grow faster and bigger than on clay soils, and this is especially apparent when you have really poor soils. But it's also, even in regular soils, there is a difference, and I'll talk about that later. So agricultural charcoal have been used all over the world. So after people discovered these special soils, the scientists discovered those special soils. They found the same kind of soil all over the world, in Africa, in India, in China, and in Northern America. And right now, for example, Japan is the largest producer of agricultural charcoal in the world. So this spurred a lot of research on biochar, and there are many international and national organizations sponsoring biochar research. There is one in the US, there is in every country, including Japan. And people find many other uses for biochar than just agriculture. It can be used for, like I said, for filtration, remediation when you have poisoned soil. It can be used for livestock feed, as building material, for example, reinforced concrete. It can be used also for protection against electromagnetic radiations in textiles and so on. But the most probably what people are really interested now is the effect it can have on climate change. Most of all the IPCC, the last IPCC report that explore the various paths to get under 5 degrees by mid-century include some kind of geoengineering, what people called carbon capture and sequestration. However, the latest evaluation of those technology is very negative. There was a recent report by the National Academy of Science saying that all these technology are not tested, sometimes are probably have a negative effect, and cannot be scaled. And this is all laid out in the very understated wording of the used in the academic papers, but it's pretty clear. So people have been interested in using biochar to be able to address this solution. So normal biomass doesn't has a neutral effect on the air, on the CO2. So the biomass grows and then is cut down, and by decomposition release the CO2 again. For the trees it's a little different. The trees, if you don't cut them down, they will live for hundreds of years in some cases. So they will capture the carbon for hundreds of years. And so just an anecdote. So in Europe, in the Middle Ages, there were vast areas that were completely deforested, that were where agriculture has been completely abandoned and that were reforested in very, very large areas. So the scientists computed that over a few hundred years, the forest that regrew in those agricultural areas took out 2 ppm of CO2 out of the atmosphere. And they also found out there was an interesting cause about that. So when all the Mongols invaded Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, they really depopulated all these areas. They killed a lot of people, and this is why these areas have been abandoned and went back to the forest. So you can have a significant effect on climate change in a quite short period of time. So if you add biochar into the equation, the biochar will be sequestered in the soil, and there will extend the capture not to 100 years, but to thousands of years. It's all about carbon. So when the wood, all the CO2 that comes from the atmosphere, originally is from plants. So even the fossil fuels are fossilized biomass that has been in this form, converted in this form over millions of years. So we are releasing all that biomass into the atmosphere. And the most natural way to capture that is basically to grow trees, to grow plants. Yeah, I loved that book. When I was a kid, it's really a really lovely book. Everybody should read that one. It's an awesome book. Yeah, it's very short, so it's a short read, but it's really nice. So how does biochar work? Well, there was a lot of discussion on why the soils could help grow plants, and there was a discussion at the turn of the century between Liebig, who was a very famous scientist and also a soil science. He was very interested in soil and food growing, and Louis Pasteur, who was a microbiologist. So Liebig said it was all in the chemistry. And this is why we are selling fertilizers today and so on, following his theories. And Pasteur said it's all in the microbiology of the soil. Everything is about microbes. Actually, in the end, Liebig considered that it's really about the microbiology. And when he died, he asked to be buried in biochar, in his coffin. So the biochar, what remains after the wood burns, is all the carbon in the lignin, the hard part of the wood. And if you look under a microscope, you get this kind of carbon structure. So it's a very porous material, very light, and it absorbs. It can host a lot of microorganisms. It can absorb a lot of water and release all these nutrients very, very slowly. So one of the key points about biochar is by itself it's inert. It doesn't have really any reaction. What it does is facilitate the transport of nutrients. It absorbs nutrients and releases them very slowly as the plant needs. So it has nothing to do, it's very different from fertilizer or other things you add in the soil, because it doesn't, the plant don't use the carbon. They just use it as a way to smooth out and the nutrient that's absorbed by the plants. It's like a sponge, essentially. So this carbon will be found in the same state, more or less, in the soil after 100 and 1,000 of years. So it just acts as a medium. It's not active by itself. So for example, in this picture, the mycorrhizae, which basically are fungus that live in symbiotic form with the trees in the roots, they essentially, what they do is they extend the capacity of the roots. So the fungus live with the tree gives the fungus sugars that they photosynthesize, and the mycorrhizae, the fungus, give them back some minerals that the fungus absorbs directly from the soil. So essentially, when you have any kind of plant that lives in the soil, you don't have only the root zone, like everybody says, but it's actually much larger, connected to other plants through the fungi. So here we can see you can see some of the fungus colonizing the biochar. That's another similar picture. And the bacteria also love the biochar, because the bacteria are prey to protozoa and amoeba that are bigger and that cannot enter the pores of the biochars. So they love this kind of environment, and they proliferate very, very fast when under the right conditions. So to understand the effect of the biochar, basically you have to understand the whole soil food web cycle. And what the biochar does is just like boost all these cycles. It doesn't have an effect, it just mediates and balances the nutrient distribution. So again, what people have found is that you have faster growth, stronger plants, better plants, and when you look at the actual content of the plant, the quality of the nutrients in the plant, this has been studied as well. So this person is a farmer, and he has been very interested in farming and food. He's a gourmet and has been looking at trying to grow really high quality, nutrient dense food. And he has been running a biochar trial, and say his food is tasting better on the plate when he eats it. I have seen also some studies done in vineyards. I'm interested in vineyards, of course, and people using biochar in vineyards and looking at the nutrient content of the fruit. And the fruit grows faster, it's bigger, but actually the density is the same. There is no effect on the nutrient in the plant. Is typically when you add nitrogen, the plant grows faster, but there is less nutrient. They grow in a way too fast. There is, it's like basically you would be eating water. That's not the case in biochar. In biochar, the nutrients in the plant keep up with the growth. So it's very, very different. So how would you prepare biochar? So people have been, there have been biochar trials that have been done which are negative. And basically the negative trials, there are essentially two reasons for that. One, people use pure biochar. So I will just talk about how you can prepare biochar before using it. And the second thing is biochar has an effect on the pH of the soil. It raises the pH because in biochar, it's not 100% char. It's not 100% charcoal. In the best case, you might have like 80-85 charcoal and 5 to 10% of minerals coming from the ash. Right. So if you add ash to a soil, it will raise the pH. So the negative results mostly have been where the pH of the soil has become too alkaline for the plants. So if you start with some alkaline soil and you put biochar in it and ash, it's going to be even more alkaline, and some plants just don't like that at all. So the best results have been in soil with low pH. So for example, in our case, in the vineyard, we have a clay soil and the pH is about like 6.2 or something like that. So it's the charcoal will enable us to raise a little bit the pH to a level where the plants like it a little bit better. So when you use raw charcoal and you put it in the soil, the first thing that it will do is just like it's a sponge. So it will absorb all the nutrients and all the water. And your plants will not grow for maybe a year or two. After that, you will get positive results. So to avoid that, what people do is you first to spray the charcoal with water so that it's charged with water. The second thing is you have to mineralize it. So what a good way to do it is use salt water. You use seawater and you dump it on the charcoal. You have all the nutrients from the ocean that are going into the charcoal. Also, to be able to reap most of the benefits, you don't want to put these big pieces of charcoal in the soil. There is a lot of surface inside that's not being used. So the water and the microbes and the fungi will not be able to use that as a home. Instead, you have to crush it, micronize it, and the finer the better. So there is some people crush it really, really fine and put it in the irrigation drip lines, and it's so fine it doesn't clog the drip line, it just goes like into the irrigation system. So you can do that as well. And the last one is kickstart all the microbial life. So instead of having the microbial life invading the carbon and depleting the soil, you want also to boost the microbial life in the charcoal before the use. So as I said, moisturize. One of the best way to do that is just like when you make charcoal. Of course, you stop it with water. You have to put it at 1/4 of an inch or smaller pieces, And as I said, the smaller the better. And you mineralize it, so you can use rock dust, carbonite, trace element, mix it, and you mix it, all these in the water and spray the charcoal. Like I said, like ocean water, seawater is very good. To inoculate, most people use like 1-to-1 compost and biochar blend, and you can do that if you have if you are doing the compost yourself. You can do that in your garden. And smaller quantities also work pretty well. You need to wait a few weeks, a couple of months, ideally, before applying it in the garden. And the longer, the better. So in terms of to charge the biochar, actually the best would be the natural sources that are next to you in your garden. The really best is forest mulch. Any kind of mulch that you can get from the forest or from trees around you. Some people do is like they prepare a biochar and they put mulch over it and let it sit over a year. So there is rain and so on that will soak up all the biochar and put all the microbial life and the mycorrhizae that exist in the leaves, in the mulch into the biochar. The next best would be worm casting. This is the only compost where there is absolutely no downside to it. It cannot be unhealthy. Some of the compost, if you don't do it properly, they will be too hot. They will have bad microbes. This is never the case with worm castings. So you can always use that. And it's very, very easy to do. You just like take whatever kitchen waste you have some worms, and they will eat all of that and transform it into really, really good compost. The next one would be composted manure from herbivore, from cows or sheep or whatever. Actually, one of the way they use biochar in Europe for 98% now, the new procedure they developed and they recommend to any farmer is instead of like using any of this method, they give biochar to the cows in the feed. So when they get the manure, it's already charged. All the manure is already with biochar, and they compost it and put it in the field. They don't use it. They don't mix it with compost or something like that. You can use also some man-made compost, like we use on our farm. We use biodynamic preparations, horn manure, for example. You can use also effective microorganism and make some bokashi, and there are others that you can use. So the application rate is not very much. In garden beds, it's about 5%. So if you take some soil, 5% of that soil will be a mix of biochar and compost. So it's not very much. In potting soil, so the best would be to use it when you're actually planting the trees or the plants or the roots, so that the biochar is at the bottom of the root. Right? So in potting soil, you can raise it to 10% and put it in your garden and plant your plants after that. Like I mentioned, for animal feed, it's about 1 to 5% in volume of the feed you give to the animal. And you can also, like, you can eat it yourself. It's good for you. I mean, people can, you can buy activated charcoal for digestion problem and so on. And if you are trying to make fresh compost, then you can go to 25% of raw biochar directly in your compost. So how do you make biochar? Well, like I said, there are two ways of burning a pile of waste agricultural products. The way traditionally you do that produces a lot of smoke, and it goes down to ashes. There is no char. There is another way, doing almost the same thing. There is a very small difference, but the end result is biochar and there is no smoke. So I was in a burn like that yesterday, and I brought this char. So basically you pile up a big pile of, these are uprooted vines. They are left outside for about a year to dry out. And what you do is actually start the fire from the top, not from the bottom. And when you start it from the top, it sucks in the air and really blaze like a torch. A pile like that, if you do it starting from the bottom, it might take a day or two to burn. If you start from the top, it will take a couple of hours. It's really, really fast. And what happens is that so there is still some oxygen going into the pile, so you will have still a little bit of ashes. So in comparison of making it like in an industrial plant, you will have about 50% char and 50% other stuff, in comparison of really high quality one, which would be 80–95% char and 5% of other stuff. But it's still much better than like regular burning a par. And when it's burned, you basically have charcoal. It's really, really fast. It's nice. So basically, and people do that with any, not like in northern Mendocino, there is a lot of, they are doing a lot of clearance. For example, they are cutting down some tan oaks that grows really fast in between the redwoods, and the redwoods is the valuable one, and they want to get rid of the tan oak. So what they are doing is making biochar out of them, instead of like just burning them or getting rid of them. And you start with the bigger material on the bottom, the smaller on the top. You start again from the top. And so the basic rule is to be able to have the same size material in a single pile, so that they all burn at the same time. If the smaller material will burn faster, and because you will stop the fire at some point, you will not be able to stop the one from the smaller one. They will turn to ashes. And when it's at that point, you can put more wood on that and consolidate and continue the fire as long as you want. And once it's at that point, you might let it for maybe an hour to burn, and then you quench it with water. And you don't need to use a lot of water, just light. And at that point, if you have put minerals in your water, then they will start charging the carbon. There are other methods to do that. So you could, the oldest method is actually a pit kiln. And these have been found like in Amazonia, in the soil profile, all over the place. These pits can be like up to 6 to 9 feet deep, and 6 to 9 feet wide and 3 to 6 feet deep. So you start digging a pit, and you put all the wood around it, and you put some stones for wind protection. And what that does is that there will be less oxygen getting into the fire. So your fire will have less oxygen and will produce more carbon, more char. Again, you put some small wood to start the fire at the top. You make sure that the fire really goes well. And then when it really goes up, it sucks in the air from below and start blazing. Again, you can pile up more material if you want to. If the fire starts having too much flame, this is when you want to add another layer of wood to smother it out. And this is basically when you start having all the gray stuff on the top. This is where you want to start it and quench it. And it's really easy to do it. Like on a small pit like that, the whole burn is done in a couple of hours. It's really, really fast. You could do that. So people have tried to do that at a smaller scale, not really big ag burns, by building specific stoves. And you can do that in your garden. You know, you can have a little barbecue pit and start making some charcoal that way. Right? People have done like this is the same. It's basically a conical fireplace, and you with limited amount of oxygen getting in, and you will produce charcoal like that. There are some what people call pyrolyzing stoves that heat the wood, burn the gas, and keep the carbon in it. And these have been used for a long time, right? So during last World War, there was a lack of fuel, and people converted all the automobiles to burning gas. It's a very simple conversion. You can probably do it still nowadays. And the principle is the same. Like you take a big can, and you put some you drill some holes at the bottom, some holes at the top. You close kind of the top a little bit, you restrict at the top, and just burn it. There are some very, very simple design that you can find online where you can do that in your backyard. And there are also a few commercial ones you can buy. So I found this one on the net for $150. And you can use them as a cooking stove as well, because that would be the best actually. In really large commercial operations, what they do, and there are a few in California, where they produce biochar. They use the gas for an electrical generator, and they sell the electricity to the grid. So there are a few companies like that. So you really get all the benefits. Okay, thank you. And if you have any question, please ask me. I have a few hands out. If you want, you can take, and you can just put your fingers in this. Yes. No, I didn't yet, because I wanted to learn, and we went, I trained myself to do that, and we did a few conservation burn in vineyards. So the last one was actually yesterday. I did one in Sonoma, where these pictures came from. So I'm still learning, and we have piles of wood that we want to do that on our farm. And this, we are planning to do that this spring. We are using, we removed a couple of rows, 2 or 3 rows, long rows, a few years back, and we uprooted them, and we planted an orchard instead to have a little bit more diversity. But we still have those vines, and we don't know what to do with them, because they don't decompose, right? So, or they will take years and years to decompose. So we need to do something. And in addition, every year we prune the vineyard, and we have a lot of material that so far we left in the rows, but they don't decompose either. So what people do in commercial vineyards, they just burn all that. And for biochar, you can use any kind of material. Then some people use just grass, a big pile of grass, and to make this biochar, and it produces really, really fine, high-quality biochar. You don't have to crush it, which is really nice, or it crushes really fast. Whether this stuff from the vineyard, you really need to crush it, and either you roll on it with a tractor, or you do it by hand, but you need to do something with it, because like that, it's not very useful. Yes, I think it's a journey. I don't think we know yet. It's. I don't think we know all the answers how to build really healthy soil. So we stopped tilling about 2 years ago, and last year the crop, we found that there was a big difference. Well, at least I felt as a winemaker that I had a good difference, a higher quality in the grapes last year, and I think it's because of no-till. And the main reason I think was because we didn't kill all the microorganisms in the soil. All the aromas, all the complexity in the fruit, all the nutrients come from the symbiotic relationship between the microorganism, whether they are fungi or microbes, with the plants. And the more diversity you have, the more complex the fruit is become, the taste of the fruit is become. And last year we had really beautiful fruit. So I'm still looking forward in how can I enrich the microbiology of the soil to get even better fruit. No, it doesn't. It enhances. You have a rich microbiological diversity in the soil. And actually, some uses of the biochar has been shown to reduce the number of pathogenic bacteria in the soil. So there is a better balance of bacteria. They are there. I mean, the pathogenic ones are everywhere, but they are simply kept in balance by all the other good bacteria that the plants use and we use. Same. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Right. Right. Right.
By helping the soil becomes richer, better,
Hopefully. I mean, one of the big reasons also is that it has been shown that biochar in the soil help with water. Whether it's in people have been using biochar in deserts, it absorbs the water and releases it really slow. And when you have overlogged areas, it helps absorb the water at that time. It really regulates the transport of water and the transport of nutrients. I view biochar really as a regulator that smoothes out and make everything more in balance.